we always said that Brexit would be a slow rolling disaster. And it really, really is. Like I say, you were always going to be chart the successes or the failures of Brexit from pretty much the start of Brexit. And yet many Brexiteers were charting the success of Brexit since about 2016. But no, we are at this point 9 months in to Brexit, and we are seeing all kinds of problems affecting a whole range of industries. Not only have we seen the labour crisis, which is hitting all sectors across the country, we are seeing the trade barriers, not only just between the UK and Northern Ireland, but soon to become up at the end of this month, at the 1st of October, the first lot of trade barriers to be put up by the UK. We've seen the massive climb down of the UK's very own certified industrial marking being pushed back a year because the British manufacturing industries turned around and said, if we start putting this on our products, we can't sell them anywhere. So this was just been an absolute rolling disaster, and the more we are in Brexit, the more of a disaster it will become. The more you will see companies shouting, screaming from the rooftops, "What are you doing? What is going on? Why are we in this situation? This is not what you promised." And eventually, what will cause people to turn around is like, well, why are prices higher? Shouldn't Brexit have caused cheaper prices? And they're like, no, that was never going to happen. But yeah, we are in a somewhat very interesting situation currently, being in the thrall of essentially free market fundamentalists who are running the show at the moment. And the meat industry is one industry that very soon is going to have a whole heap of problems, because as you can see from the headline, food and drink industry is already £2 billion worse off since Brexit. If your industry is £2 billion worse off since Brexit, you're not going to have any more investment in this country. That investment is going to lead to a shrinking of your external market. That is going to lead to lower revenues, which is ultimately going to lead to less hiring in that industry and maybe even less jobs. And maybe even some companies just pulling up roots altogether and just moving to the continent. And, we have seen that happen. It's been a very slow trickle so far, but I think as soon as these new checks coming in October, that's going to heavily hit it. And of course, going back to the UK check mark, the UK certification mark, Brexiteers have often talked about 2016, about them wanting to diverge from the European Union, and yet they've never actually talked about what it is they want to diverge, which raises huge questions, because if they have been talking about so long but they're fine with the current state of things, then why did they want to leave in the first place, unless the regulations were just a very convenient talking point to rile the British public up about, which almost certainly does seem that that's what the cases they were. But anyway, into today's article. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee. Wake and well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all the people that do support the channel that way. So let's jump into it, shall we? Like I say, this comes from London Economic. The title is, as you can see, Food and Drink Industry £2 billion worse off since Brexit. The food and drink sales to the European Union have plummeted in the first half of the year, leaving the industry $2 billion worse off since Brexit. Analysis from the trade during the first 6 months of 2021 by the Food and Drink Federation, obtained by the Politics Home, showed the food and drink exports to the EU were 15.9% down on the same period last year, and down a quarter compared to the first half of 2019. Labour says that these shocking figures have blown apart the government's myth that the trade disruption is just a temporary problem as the UK and EU adjust to the new Brexit barriers. And trust me, they've got to adjust to the new ones that are coming in October. Like I say, we are literally on a ticking clock. And I've said before, I would not be surprised if the government kick back these checks even further. But of course, it'll be the question: if will the EU actually let us kick these checks back? Because it's not just the checks that come in; there's the fact that we haven't got the infrastructure, we haven't got the manpower, we haven't got enough vets. There's all sorts of problems that we just have not even got around to solving yet. But that's Brexit in a nutshell. It really is. And of course, the news comes after the chain JD Witherspoons. Again, my heart bleeds for them. You know, me playing the world's smallest violin for Tim Martin, was forced to apologise to customers after its beer supplies became the latest casualty of the UK supply chain crush. The hospitality giant confirmed that it had seen supplies of Carling and Coors beer hit by the disruption, with some pubs not even receiving deliveries. The lorry driver and the factory shortages have been attributed to the Brexit employment rules, and the pandemic have impacted supplies at rival firms including McDonald's, Nando's and KFC in recent weeks. The meat and dairy products have been by far the worst hit by the post-Brexit bureaucracy, and the Food and Drink Federation analysis found that due to the tough rules, the British businesses selling goods of animal origin to European customers. Beef exports continued to the continent were down 24% in the first half of 2021 compared to last year, down by 37% in the first 6 months of 2019. Cheese exports were 26% down compared to 2020, and over a third of 34% down in 2019. The loss is hitting small businesses the hardest because they are finding it more difficult to deal with the post-Brexit paperwork. The figures blow apart the myths that ministers have been spinning for months, Emily formerly Shadow's Labour Secretary told Politics Home. Firstly, they show that these are not temporary teething problems. They are the direct consequences of the holes in Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. And second, they show the growth in our food and drinks exports around the world will never come close to making up for our losses with Europe, which is again what we were saying from the very beginning. All these Brexiteers nonsense was built upon the fact that once we leave the EU, somehow we're going to make up for all this shortfall with trade for the rest of the world. That is not going to happen. Like I say, you can't just simply send cheese over to Brazil, and expect them to buy cheese. It's harder than that. So it came as disruption to firms sought to increase wages and offer incentives to draw new drivers amid a significant shortage across the food and drink supply chain. Bosses at the Road Haulage Association warned last week that there is a significant shortfall of around 100,000 drivers. It said that this has been driven by thousands of European drivers leaving during the pandemic and not returning, and calling the government to add drivers to the shortage occupation list to make it easier for overseas workers to address the shortfall. Ed Miliband, Labour's shadow business secretary, called for a proper plan to address the shortage. But of course, we're not going to get a proper plan. Like I say, Ed Miliband might as well be shouting at a brick wall for expecting of the Conservative government to actually come up with a proper plan. He said, government ministers can pretend that there aren't any real issues in our supply chain, but it won't wash. They need a proper plan with which to address these problems, particularly in the HGV sector. Burying their heads in the sand has just gone on too long. It's time they got a grip. This disruption was very foreseeable, and it will not disappear without action. Rather than blaming businesses, the government should work with them to address the gaps in the sector. That is what any responsible government would do, and it is essential to project the recovery. So there we are once again. Something entirely foreseen, of course, would happen. And like I say, all these messages about, oh, that's just Project Fear, will very, very quickly come home to roost. And then, as we've said before, our direction to rejoin the EU was pretty much set from day one. It's not a matter of if we would rejoin the EU, it's just a matter of when. And like I say, they forget the original reason why we joined like the European community to begin with. It was because our industries were suffering, because again, we no longer had our colonies to rely on. We no longer had an imperial preference. We were becoming the sick man of Europe. And now that is what we are essentially trying to get back to. That is what Liz Truss is essentially trying to rebuild, all these quote unquote fantastic trade deals. Of course, as we've already seen with the Japan deal, is an absolute nonsense. And many of these deals that they have signed are literally rollover deals with what we had with the EU, while we are currently trying to negotiate the deals. And like I say, if the Japan deal is anything to go by, it was far worse than the actual rollover deal that we had signed temporarily while trying to get the deal. And now the deal we've got is even worse than the deal that the Japan has with the EU. Like I say, expect the Australian trade deal when we get to finally unveil the secrets behind that, when the curtain gets pulled, for that to be very bad. And of course, we are also expecting very soon for a New Zealand trade deal to be announced. There was one to be announced last Tuesday, but again, so far, nothing yet. But like I say, I will let you know when that all kicks off. And like I say, when we get the details behind that, that will be very interesting, because the government's own analysis say that a deal with the New Zealand will actually shrink our economy. Again, Brexit, this is nonsense that you literally just could not make up. But again, it's people refusing to actually admit that the reality, shall we say, of Britain's political and economic situation. Like I say, it will just go on to see how long the Brexiteers can keep up this song and dance show, and, you know, just avoid the disaster that's happening over there in these industries. Just look at our little song and dance. Like I say, Kate Hoey recently admitted that we had to sacrifice Northern Ireland. Remember, this was the same Katie Hoey during the referendum who said that Ireland would be perfectly fine and it would not be an issue. Turns out, not the case. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all